you need to make sure that you have the right people on your team.
Mm-hmm.
You need people who are responsible, who aren't bringing you fires, who are actually bringing you solutions. And when I say that, like bringing you solutions instead of fires or instead of problems, it's like when they call you, do they tell you that something's wrong, or do they tell you that they fixed something? It's like, hey, boss, I just spilled a gallon of paint. It's like, well, what should you do about it? Well, I should probably clean it up. Well, go fucking do that. Why are you calling me?
When your leads are low and your sales are slow, who you gonna call? Brush Buster. Scaling up the game. Big projects, friend.
What's up, everybody? Mike and Jesse here, the Brush Buster gang. You listen to the Painter Growth Podcast. I'm founder of Painter Growth, Michael Hickman, and I'm here with Mr. Jesse Taryn. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Stoked to be here on another amazing episode. Let's bust some brushes here.
You ready to bust some brush?
Always.
We can do like the
When your leads are low and your sales are slow, who you gonna call? Brush Buster.
good way to start.
Yeah, I love that.
Crazy what AI can do. Yeah, that was not me singing, by the way. That was AI. So created that whole song from a prompt. Pretty wild.
It's amazing.
So I'm gonna read the first one, and we don't even have a name. We just got M, and it's Hey Brush Busters. I'm thinking about switching from paying my team in cash to payroll. It sounds like a good idea, but I'm a bit nervous about it, especially since we don't have a huge reserve right now. How did you guys make the switch? I'd love to hear your experiences. So there's a lot of guys and girls who come through our program who, when they start, like their painters have a day rate, basically like pay them at cash at the end of every single day. And I mean, this is okay in theory, and it's an okay idea. Like in theory, when you're just getting started, it's like, okay, my painters, they work a day, I pay them a day. They work a day, I pay them a day. But if you ever have like the desire to get out of like the book a job, do a job kind of like the cycle where you're always worried about what tomorrow is going to look like we need to start thinking in longer time horizons. And one of the first places you can do that is how the relationship that you have with your team and the relationship that you have with money. One of the many negative parts about paying a painter a day rate every single day or at the end of every week even is that they don't have any incentive to finish the job. They don't have any incentive to do good work or to work quickly. They're just purely there to get their paycheck at the end of the day. And they're going to do, like, the way that human nature works is that they're going to do the absolute minimum in order to get you to pay them at the end of the day. What comes to mind for you, Jesse?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. And the other part, I'll just address the second part of it, which is we don't have a huge reserve right now. So the best part about running a painting company, in my opinion, is that we don't pay out until we complete the job, right? So that money, you don't actually even need a huge reserve. You just need to set the expectation with your painters that they're not going to get paid until the job's complete. And how do you say that? It's like, well, where do you think the money comes from? The money comes from the client. Once that money comes in, I pay out, we pay it out on payroll, and we pay it out on, pay off the paint store and any of the costs, other costs that you incurred on the job. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. How we set it up is we run it every 2 weeks, right? And we go Sunday to Sunday is the cutoff. And then we pay out. So any jobs that are completed by the Sunday are then paid out on the Friday, right? So we have actually time to complete those jobs. We collect the AR, the accounts receivable, the money that people owe us. We collect that first, and then we have more than enough to cover the payroll in that setting.
Yeah, I think there's there's levels to this, right? Like level 1, level 0 would be like paying your painters a day rate. Mm-hmm. Level 2 would be paying them like weekly or bi-weekly. Level 3 would only be paying them for projects that are completed. for the most part, like, and incentivizing them to like get that job done by Friday so they can get paid by Sunday or whatever your cutoff dates were. I think our cutoff date was Sunday to get paid that following Friday. And then the next level, like level 5, would be paying a piece rate system, a fixed proportion of your job for payroll, and only paying it once the job is complete. So it's like, it's way better on cash flow, it's way better on margins, and it's super motivating for your team to not only paint quicker, but also maintain that quality because they're the ones responsible for closing out the job.
Yeah,
And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, it gives you way more options to work with your team when they are incentivized for those jobs to close, right? And so when I'm working with our teams and we're looking at the painters, I'm actually planning with them what jobs are going to get completed before that cutoff. And I'm saying, hey, if we complete those jobs, you're going to make this amount on this next paycheck. And I always connect it back to their goals and to them. So you get way more buy-in from your painters. You see their productivity increase, and they'll do things that you totally wouldn't expect them to do. I've had painters, as long as the customer is good with it, stay on site till like 9 or 10 p.m. to close out jobs, which is insane.
Or start a new job at 3 p.m. on a Friday.
Yeah.
The one shift I want to make from what you said is when you're presenting your how much the painter is going to be making, you don't tell them how much the paycheck is going to be, because that one doesn't matter as much. You tell them how much an hour they made. What was their effective hourly rate? Because that means more to an employee who's thinking hourly. It's like, if your rate is 25 an hour, but on this piece rate system for the last 2 weeks, you just made 32 an hour because of the productivity that you had, they're going to be pumped. Because like, man, I just made $32 an hour. Like, this is wicked.
Yeah.
Do that again.
Yeah. And there's one caveat on that, is just like, it's understanding how they think about things, right? I've had a lot of painters that are just like, hey, I want to make this amount every 2 weeks. And it's about the total sum. And they're like, I don't care if, actually how many hours I have to make. They just look at that total sum. So back to your point, it's just understanding what's important to them. Is it that hourly rate and the productivity, and they're making the most bang for their buck? Or is it just that total amount that they're going to get paid, and understanding what's important to your clients, or not your clients, your staff,
your team. Now, the second part of this question is like, how did you guys make the switch? So I never paid my employees a day rate, to be honest. It didn't start. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think right from the get-go as well, we just set up payroll right from the get-go, and that was just our initial system. So didn't necessarily make the switch, but just backtracking, if I had to make the switch, we just talked about time horizon, so I'd expand it, right? It's not like you're going to go to your painters tomorrow and say, hey, tomorrow we're going to start doing this, but going to them and having a conversation and say, hey, by if it's August 22nd today, by September 15th, after that, we're going to be moving to this system, and this is how the system looks, and resetting those expectations, but giving it enough time so that your painters know that things are going to switch, and they can make arrangements in their life so that instead of them relying on, that day rate if they need to pay bills or other expenses that they have, they're not just blindsided. Now they don't have that cash coming in every single day. So you want to give yourself and your painters just enough time to make that switch, and then reset those expectations.
Yeah, definitely setting the expectation is really important, and explaining the why behind it. Yeah. Right. It's like, hey guys, we're year to day rate right now, and we're actually going to switch to a bi-weekly payroll. Here's why this is important. Because like, we're gonna, like, you guys like being employed by us? Yes. Okay. You like making money here? Yeah. Okay. You like our culture? Yeah. All right. So in order to maintain like the success of our business, we need to shift to this, which is going to be better for cash flow. And ultimately, going to be better for you too, because you're going to be able to get paid more on the system, and it's just going to be every 2 weeks. Sound good? Cool. Yeah. So just selling it to them is going to be an important part of it. And if they refuse to do it, then maybe they're not the right guy for your crew.
Yeah. I think what you said there too is just really understanding why is it actually better for them, and making sure that you can explain that and why it's better than them. Because if you just go to them and say, oh, this is gonna be better for you, and they say, well, why? You better have a good answer and understand the details of why it actually is better for them to be on the system.
I know P. Shall we go to the next one? You want to read this one?
Yep, let's rock and roll. So, dear Brush Busters, I'm really pushing myself out of my comfort zone and trying to get the job on the spot instead of just sending quotes via email. However, I faced a situation this week that caught me off guard. I met with a client who insisted on getting 3 quotes before making a decision. It left me wondering, how should I handle the situation when I'm up against 2 other quotes and don't even know what their prices are? This time, I just said, sounds fair, I'll follow up in a couple days. but I don't feel like that was enough. If any advice on how to increase my chances of winning the job would be greatly appreciated. That's from Adam. All right. Do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, the 3 quotes objection is there are some clients who are like, who absolutely, you can't overcome that 3 quotes. They're just like, you'll do everything right, and they're still going to be like, I'm going to get 3 quotes, usually like the rough guys who have like been in the trades for a long time, and they have no emotion in their decision making, right? It's purely a logical decision for them. To really move beyond that, just kind of like I implied there, is you really want to move beyond just the rational decision making and move into more of like the emotional decision making matrix, and getting the clients to really like you, to really understand you, to know that you're going to do a good job, to create that trust, and really create a value discrepancy. And when I say value discrepancy, it's like, is the value they're providing greater than the cost in their mind, right? So the cost being the price, the value being what you're providing, and the bigger the value discrepancy that you can create at the sales appointment, the higher likelihood that that client is going to close on the spot. And the ways that you can create that value discrepancy is by, like, with a really thorough pre-sales call, making sure both decision makers are on there, asking for the job ahead of time, doing a good walkthrough, having a very detailed quote, clearly stating your inclusions and exclusions, asking them about their needs and their wants and their desires, and selling those back to them, asking for the job again, asking them if they're comfortable, doing another close. Like, if you follow that type of a process, you're going to be a lot more likely to have that objection kind of dissolve.
Yeah, and the one thing that you said there is ask for the job on the initial call with them. And I think that, so my question for Adam is, did you know that they were getting more quotes before you got to the estimate? And if you don't know that, you haven't actually done your job prior to that. You should know that objection. You should know those things going into the quote. And what you can do is, on that first call with the customer, you just said you actually asked for the job. So what that sounds like is, hey, when I come out at 10 a.m., assuming you trust us to do the work, would you feel comfortable booking in when I come out there? And once you ask that question, they're going to say, well, no, we're getting 3 other quotes. Okay, got it. Understood. That's all you have to say. Now you're bringing up that objection, and you've asked for the job without asking for the job, right? So now you go to the estimate, and this helps you understand what they're doing. So if you go to the estimate and you understand they're getting other quotes, you can actually lean into that more, right? So, hey, have you guys had the other quotes yet? Right? You're actually going to talk about it during the estimate, or when are those quotes scheduled? And you actually ask them, when are those quotes scheduled? And most of them don't have that quote scheduled at all yet, right? And so it kind of puts them on the spot to actually get it there. But what I find is, once I ask that question and it brings up the objection, then when I get to the estimate, I just talk about it. And then by the time that I've done my full process at the estimate, and then we actually go to close, they're like not even thinking about the other quotes, because I've already addressed that. Because if I didn't know that, if I didn't ask that question on the first call, and then I go through my process, and then I go to pitch on the spot, and the first time that I'm hearing they're getting other quotes is when I actually asked for the job, like, you're so far behind the 8 ball, right? You haven't done your job prior to that. And you're not in a great position if that's the case, right? And that's why, you have to say, okay, well, I'll follow up. If you do get into that situation, though, again, what you want to do is, so you go to close and they say, well, we're getting other quotes. Then I would just say, great, when are you getting those other quotes? And then most people will actually say that they'll start to say it'll be within a more reasonable time frame. So you say, okay, great. They'll say, we're getting quotes on Friday. How about I give you a call at Friday at 3 p.m.? So after that quote, and we'll compare the quotes, and we'll go apples to apples, and we can see which direction you want to go. Right. Yep. And then make sure you actually have that call scheduled at an exact time. You call them at that exact time, and then you can go over it. And if you just add this level of customer service to people, then it does become less about the price and just more about, like what you're talking about, adding that value. The other way I overcome this as well is, I just ask them, great, why are you getting other quotes? Is there anything that I missed here that you guys are looking for? Right. And they'll say, no, I have no idea what the prices are. So, you know what, if you went and got 10 quotes, there's probably going to be 5 or 6 that are lower and 5 or 6 that are higher. We're generally right in the middle, but our goal here is to deliver a 13 out of 10 experience. I always say 13 out of 10 experience. And then that usually overcomes it as well too. I'm like, do you really want to go spend all that time to do it, or do you feel comfortable right now and you want to go ahead and get you moving? So those are a few things that I do that really help me overcome that. But the number one thing is, you got to know what are the objections that the customer is going to have before you even get to the estimate. And if you know what those objections are coming in, then you can tailor your estimate to be totally different, where again, you're talking about it, you're just getting that objection out of the way before you actually go for the close.
Yeah, the one thing I want to add, yes, it's the most important to ask ahead of time at the setup call. It's like, hey, is there once we go through our process, I'm gonna make sure I understand your project. I'm gonna give you an exact cost it's gonna take to do this job. If you're comfortable with me and the price within your budget, are you gonna be ready to move forward? Or book a time in our schedule. And you'll get yes, or you'll get no, I need 3 quotes, or no, I need my hut out there, or no, I need whatever. And so you get that objection at least introduced at that time. And then when you're going for the actual close and the estimate, the kind of questioning sequence that has worked well for me in the past is, okay, are you comfortable with the price, or is the price within your budget? All right. Do you feel like we're going to do a good job? Is this about like the cost that you were thinking it was going to be? Cool. So if you're comfortable with me and you like the price and you know that we're going to do a good job, is there anything else that we missed? Okay. Is there anything else that you might be looking for in another painting contract that we didn't provide yet? Okay, cool. Then why don't we just go ahead right now? Save you a bunch of time.
Another great line there. Is it unreasonable for us to get you scheduled in today? It's a great line.
Yeah. When we were at the Hormozy event, they're like selling us into the next offer. And the one sales guy came up to me and he asked me a couple questions, and his exact closing line was, would it be crazy to get you signed up right now?
The best part is like we didn't sign up then, but we did the next day.
Yeah. So like beat us down.
Yeah, they're really good at that.
And there's an example where there is no 3 quotes. There is no comparative, right? What does Alex always say? It's like be 0 of 1.
Yeah.
1 of 0.
Yeah.
Yeah. And their offer is certainly 1 of 0.
I
like to think that we're 1 of 0 too at Painter Growth.
That's right. Should we roll on to the next one?
Yeah. Hey, coaches. I've been getting offers to take on commercial painting projects, but I'm unsure if I'm fully prepared for that kind of work. Well, I do want to expand and tackle these larger jobs. I'm not quite sure where to start, how to ensure I'm ready for the scale and complexity of commercial projects. What steps should I take to prepare myself and my business for commercial painting? What a can of worms. This could take the rest of the episode.
Yeah, that's from Eric from San Francisco. I can start on this one. I'd be curious with Eric's business, like what size of business he is today and how much experience just even in residential that he has. That's kind of the first and foremost. I think a lot of people try to switch to commercial too soon, where they don't have enough experience and enough reps on the residential side to really have those processes and procedures in place. And on your residential side, if you don't have a super dialed in system all the way from your marketing to your sales to your production and making sure that the job gets produced really well, then taking on a commercial job it's probably not a great idea. So that I honestly, most people that we talk to, I really steer clear, and I'm like, until you get your residential business to, X amount of revenue, X amount of profit, and you have somebody in place that's really running that, like, don't even worry about commercial, right? Because it's like you said, it's a whole nother can of worms that you can open up. Yeah, that being said, if you are going to start in commercial and it's something you do want to take on, there are different levels of complexity to projects, right?
Oh yeah, there's levels in that game.
Right. And so if you're going to do commercial, I would say start with it's an exterior repaint, and it's like not too big. Like think of in the lines of like maybe 20 to 40K. Like don't try to
out of a strip mall or something.
Yeah, exactly. So or a condo building or a strata or something like that, where it's just not too big, because when you get into the really big projects, then the other part that comes up is how are you going to finance it? How are you going to cash flow this big project? Because the payment terms are very different. And but in the 20 to 40, it's kind of similar to what could be in the residential size. So see if you can find those jobs first and make sure they're not complex at all. I remember even last year I had a tender for a Walmart job, and it was about a $500K job, and it was super complex. And I just said, not at this time. And I just walked away from it. Right. And because that, if I took that on, sure, we might've made $250,000, but we just weren't in a position where we were ready to take that on. Right. So we had
a client a couple of months ago. He's still in our group, but He's just getting started. He booked like, his first 10 residential jobs. And then an opportunity came across his desk to bid on like this 120K commercial, like new build. He's like, guys, I got this opportunity. How do I do this? I'm like, you are not ready for this. This is going to bankrupt you.
Yeah.
And it's going to put you under and all this stuff. So, there's levels to it. So I would kind of piggyback off what you said. There's commercial repaints and there's commercial new. So if you're just getting into, say your business is like 30 to 80K a month, mostly on the like the resi repaint side, you can probably do some small commercial jobs, right? Through a property manager or through a GC or something like that. I would say cap out at about 50K, when you're just getting started, and repaint, not from blueprints, but from like a walk around and quoting the same way that you quote time materials type thing. Then make sure that you have enough money to cash flow these projects. If it's a commercial repaint, you might be able to negotiate like a payment term where you get a solid deposit up front, like a 25% or a 50%. If that's the case, great. A lot of the times though, especially if you're working for a bigger property management company or bigger GC, they won't pay you anything until like 60 days after the job is done. And so if you keep in mind that like, if you have 50% gross margin, maybe even like a 40% gross margin, so 60% cost on this project, at a 50K project, you're looking at $30,000 of money out of your pocket for at least 2 months until you get paid. So that's what we mean when you say, can you cash flow this? Do you have $30,000 in your bank account that could disappear for 2 to 3 months that you wouldn't and still like not go under? That's kind of what we mean by cash flow, especially if you can't get deposits up front. So make sure you're like swinging within your league, so that you don't go bankrupt, because a lot of companies do go bankrupt by taking on projects that are bigger than them.
Yeah. Can I share a quick story about back in 2016 when I took on my first commercial project?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I decided to partner up with another local painting company to do it. And we were taking on, because we both wanted to get into commercial, and we're like, hey, let's do it together. And so we quoted it. We wanted it so bad that we underbid it too. And it was a new build. And so it ended up being about, I think it was like 28 grand or something like that. But we wanted it so bad. We just wanted this commercial job. And so we each put some crews on it. And long story short, like we also had no experience in new builds at the time. This is back in 2016 and whatnot. And I'll just tell a story of a huge mistake that we made that's pretty hilarious. I think everyone will get a kick out of this. So we were spraying on the inside, and then there was all the trim boards, right? And so we're like, okay, we're going to take these around back and we're going to spray these out before, they put them on. And there wasn't that much room. We were with really limited space. And so our painters sprayed them out, let them dry, and then they stacked them all on top of each other. And we came back the next morning and all the trim boards were stuck to each other. And we started pulling it off, and it was like destroying these brand new trim boards. And so I think we spent, I don't know, probably 10 grand of labor, like fixing these trim boards. This job, it started in July of 2016, and we didn't finish it until February 2017. And we had a choice. We actually had an option. We had a partial payment halfway through, so we got about half the amount. And this guy and I, we looked at our numbers, and we're like, and I looked at it and I said, hey, if we walk away right now, we break even. And this was like in August, right? So we're back in August. I said, if we walk away right now, we've learned a lot of lessons here. We've made a ton of mistakes. This job's a disaster. We can break even, walk away, whatever. And we came to the conclusion that we're getting into commercial. We're going to finish this job, right? So that was in August. Another 6 months goes by. So much labor. We end up losing a ton of money on it. We didn't even get paid the full amount out. And it was the most stressful thing of life trying to get this job done. And then we're like, we sat back and we're like, well, that amount of revenue would have been just like doing five residential exteriors. That would have taken us like, a month to do that amount of work at that time. And so, anyways, that was my first experience in commercial and new build. Disaster, a lot of lessons. And so yeah, just know what you're doing.
Yeah. honestly, I had a similar story. Actually, no, not similar. This one was not that bad, but it was the first time I took on a custom home. And if you've ever painted a custom home new build, like it's like pretty when you've never done it before, like you need to know what you're doing in terms of like logistics and timing, and there's some tricks of the trade and things like that. Anyway, one of the things that had to do was spray the trim boards, right? Before they wanted me to spray the trim boards before they got installed, at least the first coat or whatever. So I'd like set up a little spray booth in the garage, in the homeowner's garage. I like put plastic down on the floor and on the walls, and I had like my sawhorses or whatever, and I went and started spraying them. Anyway, I number one, like dust got kicked up everywhere, and like they ended up getting covered with like speckles of dust. That was awful. And then number two, I like got them all painted and moved them inside, the carpenter came, moved them inside, and then I cleaned up all the plastic, and there was 2 seams on the concrete that the plastic didn't cover, or like it blew open when I was like spraying it, and we just had like these strips of paint along the concrete. Oh man, the builder was not happy. Anyway, we all make those mistakes at some point in our careers.
Now that we shared a couple horror stories, let me tell one good story, and then we can move on. I developed this relationship with this general contractor, and it was they had a project that we bid on a few years ago, and it was a exterior school, and with some interior on it as well. But it was a repaint, and I quoted it for it was just under $50K, and then we had a bunch of add-ons and whatnot. And I put a sub crew on it, like my main sub crew on it, and they crushed it out. Like the total job, like going back and forth, ended up being like 3 or 4 weeks or something like that. But they crushed it out. I was actually at a wedding. I was like on vacation most of the time that they did this, and then I came back, and we profited $26,500 on that job. So again, there's complexity is one thing. Like choose easy jobs if you're getting into commercial, and then know what you're doing. Or if you have subcontractors and whatnot, just make sure they've had a ton of experience doing what you're doing, and you can make them insanely profitable. So there's also some a huge upside to doing it as well.
Yeah. I'll piggyback on a positive commercial repaint one that just came to mind when you said that. We got this. I was dealing with this property management group, and they sent me this project to bid, which was like all of the railings on this entire apartment complex. It was like a, I don't know, 14 or 16 story apartment building, and every single railing and all of like the units. So there was like, I don't know, 80 railings or something like that. And I think the project was around that like $35,000 mark. So it was a good project, and it was a great one to kind of get my feet wet when it came to commercial work. And I bought like 8 angle grinders for like each one of my painters, and like everyone got all the safety equipment, and then we got the Sherwin rep to come out and recommend what type of product and process to use and all that stuff. And yeah, the painters ended up just like having the budget, like just getting it crushed out, and we had like a 70% gross margin on this project, because like the paint cost is almost nothing, because you're painting steel railings, right? 1 gallon gets you like 5 railings. So yeah, I made like $20,000 in a couple of weeks on that project, and I was like mostly hands off. But when you start getting those bigger projects, project management becomes a lot more important. Like making sure your guys are productive and they're on task, and they're organized and they're motivated. Because like when you're doing something monotonous like that for like days or weeks at a time, it's very easy to get lost in the project.
Yeah, I love it. And if you are going to prepare yourself, you have to know the different requirements for getting in. So you're gonna have to have like a different level of insurance. You're gonna have to have your workers' compensation. You have to have safety protocols super dialed in. Like there are a number of steps you need to take that these companies are going to ask for to make sure that you can actually operate on their sites.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention that earlier, but I forgot. So good point there. Yeah, you need big insurance, you need, liability, you need workman's compensation or workers' comp or WorkSafe, whatever they call it in your area. And then some of the bigger ones will need their own specific safety trainings that you have to go through, just like lots of hoops. So just make sure you know what you're getting into.
Awesome. That was fun sharing some stories. Good.
One more today? One more letter?
One more. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. I will read this one, I think. Is it my turn? I think so.
Sure.
Brush busters, newbie here. I'm having trouble managing multiple projects at once. I often find myself overwhelmed and struggling to keep everything on track. What are some effective ways to improve project management and timely completion of all jobs? William from Durham. Where's Durham? Is that in North Carolina?
Yeah, it's Raleigh, Durham. It's a beautiful area. Yeah,
cool.
Love that area. I can start with this one.
Yeah,
so
get her go.
Yeah, I think when you start scanning, every time you add a crew, it does add another layer of complexity to it, right? And even going from 1 to 2 crews is one thing, but adding that third crew is just like a totally different game once you go there. So the biggest thing that you need to do is when you add jobs and crews is you as the production manager of your company or the owner of your company is you need to start getting way further ahead than the day that your crews are operating on. So when I was running my company, I was always trying to be about 3 to 4 weeks ahead of where my crews were. And what does that mean is that I've communicated with clients start times, the pressure washing has gotten done, the colors are already sorted, and they have their tentative start dates. And that's always 3 weeks ahead for every single customer. And so if you have, 3 or 4 crews, you're communicating with 12 to 15 customers at a time to make sure that they're all good. And I'm consistently updating the customers to make sure that they know the updates and they know. And I always say tentative start date for customers, right? And so that they know that. And I always say it depends on the crew, on the previous projects, and the weather. And I'm just updating them consistently. Now, how do I do that? Is I look at my production planner. I have a production planner that I have it on Google Sheets that I've built out, that shows me where each crew is and which jobs they're at, what their name is. And it helps me play. The production planner is one of the things that, I pretty much have open on my computer at any given time because it allows me to play chess in my business. And it allows me to pick specific jobs for specific crews as well. But the big part of getting out of the overwhelm is that right now what's going on is that you have this train of painters going on. And it's like, you're laying the next track right now. Like you're so close that if anything goes wrong there, the train's going to derail. And so what you need to do is start getting that 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks ahead. And so that if there is issues on the track, you can go back and fix that before the train comes and the train keeps going. And again, so your role as a production manager is to keep laying the tracks further and further out so that your train can keep going and you can fix issues before they even become issues.
Yep. 100%. So being ahead is obviously important. Having the production schedule, production planner, we have our template that we give to our clients. But I would say even before all of that, you need to make sure that you have the right people on your team. Mm-hmm. You need people who are responsible, who aren't bringing you fires, who are actually bringing you solutions. And when I say that, like bringing you solutions instead of fires or instead of problems, it's like when they call you, do they tell you that something's wrong, or do they tell you that they fixed something? It's like, hey, boss, I just spilled a gallon of paint. It's like, well, what should you do about it? Well, I should probably clean it up. We'll go fucking do that. Why are you calling me?
Can I share a quick story on that? Because this is so relevant. I had this general manager, and it's like every time he called me, it was just problems. And I'm like, and I finally like snapped one day, and I'm like, hey man, I like hate talking to you in the day now because every time you call me, you just dump problems on me. I said, can you start bringing solutions to me and actually think about a potential solution before you call me moving forward? And it completely changed our relationship after that point. I remember I was in this coffee shop called Islands Cafe, and I remember just being like, I'm not going to pick up the phone anymore unless you have like 5 solutions to your problem. and we started doing that with every single one of our painters and subcontractors. That said, if you're going to call me or you're going to call my general manager, call us. You can let us know what the problem is and give us the 3 to 5 solutions that you've come up with. If you need confirmation, that's great. But generally what happened is the calls actually stopped because they would just solve the problem. They don't even need to call me.
Yeah. And part of that is giving them permission to solve problems. Yeah. Right. A lot of people want to be micromanagers, especially in small businesses where the boss is like, don't make any decisions without me. It's like, okay, well, that's the way to stay small and to keep your business small. Recently in Painter Growth, I had a team member. We were having a meeting, just like our weekly 101 or whatever it was. And she's like, hey, Mike, like, what do you think I should do about this? And I was like, well, what do you think you should do about it? And she's like, well, I think I should do this. It's like, okay, go do that. And then I said like the 3 magic words in business that a lot of people really struggle with saying. But I said it, and everyone should get used to try to say this at least, once a week in their business. I trust you. And those 3 words can make all the difference in the world in terms of how many phone calls you get. It's like, oh, you want to make a decision? I trust you. You're going to make the right decision. You can do it.
I remember training my painters back in 2015, and I really didn't even know how to paint. And I was training them, and they were inexperienced as well. And I remember being on site, and they're like, "Hey, Jesse, what do you think about this ladder placement?" I'm like, "What do you think about it?"
You're going to be the one up there.
Right? And then they're like, "Well, I think it's pretty good." And I'm like, "Well, I think it's pretty good too." Or they'd be like, "Hey, how do I do this?" I'm like, "How do you think we would do this?" And they'd be like, "Well, I think I would do this." I'm like, "That seems reasonable."
Yeah.
And so by not knowing, there's almost like a thing of like, because I didn't know all the solutions or answer, I would just throw the question back to them, and it had them start to think for themselves way quicker. And so if you're training painters right now and they ask you a question, instead of just answering it right away, just throw the question back at them. Like, what do you think we should be doing in this situation? And if you just keep doing that over and over and over again, it's crazy how much your team and your people will start to think for themselves, and you have that trust that you're talking about in them.
Going back to the question here, finding yourself overwhelmed, struggling to keep everything on track. I want to go just on the tactical thing, like one quick tactical tip that I thought of that's really helpful. And that's just to have simple checklists for your crews. Job opening checklist, job closing checklist, end of day checklist, start of day checklist. And if you can provide that for your team, the cool thing about those is you only have to create them once. You got to spend, half a day figuring out your start a day, end a day, start a job, end a job checklist, and just give those to your clients a little duotang or something, or you're not your clients, rather your team. And you'll be surprised how valuable just having a little checklist like that is.
Yeah, our business lives and dies on checklists.
Yeah. Whenever you hear someone like your business needs systems, literally like 80% of systems are just checklists.
Yeah. Which is the same. My favorite analogy is every time you take a flight, it's like, what do you think the pilot's doing to prepare to take off? He's done this 1,000 or more times, right? And yet they still use their checklist to make sure that everything's good. And then that way, that if anything does come up in the flight issues, they know that all the foundations and basics are taken care of, and they can actually go into real problem solving of what's going on.
Yep.
And so if you have these checklists in place, you just know in your business that all these foundational pieces, again, going back to what we learned at Hormozi's Mastermind, is business is really simple. It's just about basics and fundamentals in place. And I think a lot of people just try to skip the fundamentals because they're looking for that silver bullet. But really, it's just about having hundreds of golden BBs dialed in, doing the right thing consistently over a long period of time, and you'll be insanely successful.
Yeah. And we still use checklists on all our customer facing calls. All our team who hosts those calls have checklists, onboarding, on ramp. And like, I've done 100 onboarding calls. I don't do them anymore, but like when I was even on my like 50th, 100th, whatever onboarding call, I had the checklist open, and that it not like I knew what to do, but that makes it so much easier from a mental load, because you're not trying to make sure that you remember every single step. Oh yeah. And this, oh yeah. And that, but it's just like right there in front of you. And then if you ever need to make a change in your process, or you try something new and it works really great, then you can just add it to the list. Now you're doing it every single time.
Yep. And that level of where overwhelm comes from is when everything is just living in your brain, right? And so when you can actually get things out of your head and onto a piece of paper, or onto if you're using Drive or Google Sheets, whatever it is, like just get it out of your head, and you'll be able to sleep a lot better.
Oh, 100%. I mean, oftentimes before bed, I'll just have to write down everything I'm thinking about on I use Apple Notes religiously.
Yeah.
The mess my Apple Notes app. But anyway, I'll just like write down what I'm thinking, and I'm like, hey, great, I don't need to think about it anymore, and I can go to sleep.
Yep. Beautiful.
Cool. Well, that was fun.
That was great. That was fun sharing more specific stories. I think we should do that more often.
Yeah. Oh man, stories for days. I think yeah, people like that. Maybe instead of letters, people can just share horror stories, and we can just all commiserate.
Sure. Throw in a couple good ones too. There's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Cool, man. Well, thanks again. That was fun.
Okay.